This is an important story on developments in law in the Trump era. There are judges now across the country who are fighting back against the way this administration has cracked down on immigration while also failing to come up with a solution to the family reunification problems it caused. Now, it's been over 2 weeks since a federal judge ordered the Trump administration to reunite all of the 2,500 migrant children separated from their parents. Now, the good news is most have been reunited, but 559 remain in government custody, and 365 parents of those children have been deported, which is itself an ongoing humanitarian crisis. Now, on Thursday, a federal district court judge voiced outrage when discovering that the Trump administration was deporting a mother and daughter while their court hearing was still happening. And this was a highly unusual move, the judge demanding the plane turn around and bring them back to the U.S. and threatening to hold the Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions, in contempt, something we were discussing in a different context earlier tonight. Now, those two people seeking asylum were basically trying to escape what they call gang violence from El Salvador, and that's part of a lawsuit that has been filed by the ACLU that challenges the way that Sessions has excluded people who are fleeing gang violence from getting asylum. Meanwhile, the union that represents 350 immigration judges in our country is pushing back against pressure from the Trump administration to try to speed up these deportations. This is something called the National Association of Immigration Judges, and they did something important. They filed a grievance against Jeff Sessions' DOJ. This was on Wednesday when it began, because it occurred after there was a DOJ replacement of a Philadelphia judge who was delaying the deportation of this young undocumented immigrant from Guatemala. Now, this judges union is basically arguing that the DOJ is overstepping its authority and undermining a key concept, judicial independence. I'm pleased to say that I am joined now by Judge Dana Leigh Marks, President Emeritus of the National Association of Immigration Judges. She's practiced immigration law for 41 years in San Francisco. Judge, thank you for making time to walk us through this tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, Ari. It's a complicated issue.
It is, and one that is important, and that you and your colleagues have argued has both a legal due process dimension and a moral dimension. So for people who are following this and saying, what does this mean, that judges are kind of pushing back against what Jeff Sessions and the Trump administration are doing, how does that work, and what are you trying to achieve?
People have to remember that the immigration judges in the United States are administrative judges, which is a distinction that means we work within the Department of Justice. Unlike most judges, that means that we have a boss, Attorney General Sessions. Congress sets the laws, but many of the policies that are implemented are established through the Attorney General and directives that he or she makes. But immigration judges are the trial-level judges who decide whether or not someone is actually in the country illegally, and if so, whether that person is entitled to some kind of benefit, such as asylum. So we need a guarantee of judicial independence, of decisional independence, so that we can be sure that political pressures are not affecting the way that judges are allowed to carry out their role. And recently we have felt additional encroachments on our ability to do our job as judges. And that's what brought us to this very unusual step of choosing to take an individual's case, a labor union grievance for a sitting immigration judge, and for our association to join with this judge and to publicly release what the grievance is.
Right.
In order to help highlight how our decisional independence is being encroached upon.
Just to pause on that, because you're running through a lot of important stuff, is it fair to say that your organization has taken this, as you put it, unusual step because of your view of how extreme the Jeff Sessions encroachment has been on what would otherwise be your authority to handle these cases?
That is accurate, but I want to make it clear as well that we are not a partisan organization. We are a professional association, and we have had criticisms of encroachment on our independence in different ways, smaller ways, by several administrations, both Democratic and Republican. And we have pushed back, but not quite as dramatically as we're doing now.
Do you believe, or have evidence to support the belief, that the administration doesn't really want to solve the remaining cases. That part of the problem is that while they've been ordered to fix the problem they created, there is still some lack of desire or commitment to reuniting all the families.
The evidence that might exist to support that argument is the fact that since the Department of Homeland Security has been created about 15 years ago, the budget for the Department of Homeland Security rose by 400%, and yet the budget for the Immigration Court was only increased by 72%. That really becomes dramatic when you realize that we were under-resourced at the beginning. So it has allowed a tremendous backlog of over 730,000 cases pending before a core of just 350 immigration judges, which is an overwhelming and inappropriate amount of cases for any judge to be expected to handle in an effective and efficient way. That could be, if one wants to be cynical, planned, or it could just be inadvertence. One of the reasons why we've argued that we should not be in the Department of Justice is that the primary goal and role of the Department of Justice is law enforcement, and it's a premier law enforcement agency that we're very proud of. But that said, that's not necessarily the place for a neutral immigration tribunal, which is what we are. So we feel that our mission no longer fits within the context of the Department of Justice, and we've urged Congress to take us out of the Department of Justice and make us a separate organization that doesn't have a law enforcement boss at its head.
You have given us a primer here on some of the most important issues, including the separation of powers, the role of these adjudications within the Justice Department, and the larger question that I think America continues to debate, which is immigration really as simple as building a wall and deporting people, or is there this much larger process that requires both due process and humanity? And so, Judge Marks, I appreciate you spending time with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Ari.
Thank you.
I appreciate your allowing me.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.